Welcome to Monsters of History. Monsters of History is a series about history's most infamous serial killers and human monsters. From ancient Greece to the Russian Empire, join me as we dig up skeletons from some of history's most reprehensible human monsters. In this first episode, we're going to be talking about one of the very first recorded serial killers in history. Our story begins with Liu Pengli, the Han Prince of Jidong in 2nd century China. Liu Pengli was born around 144 BC. He was the third son of Liu Wu and nephew of Emperor Wen. Ironically, his father was somewhat of a murderer himself, as he was responsible for the assassination of a royal minister. Shortly before Liu Pengli was born, his father had died in exile. The Empress was said to be so devastated by the loss of her son, she begged Emperor Wen to split up Liu Wu's kingdom of Yuan and give a piece to each of his sons, Liu Pengli being one of them. As a teenager, Liu Pengli became very arrogant and began hanging out with bandits, outlaws, warriors, and thieves. He was hot-headed and quick to anger. It wasn't uncommon for young Liu to fly into fits of rage when he didn't get his way. As he grew older, his temper would get worse. Liu would use his connections with the criminal underworld to hire thieves and bandits to terrorize anyone who got in his way. Before too long, Liu decided it simply wasn't enough to wreak havoc on specific individuals. He needed more. Liu had begun to hire his own personal band of mercenaries and bandits who would join him on expeditions. Liu was said to give boisterous, charismatic speeches to his men in the field, and quickly developed a cult-like following among his men. Bored and running low on supplies, Liu had concocted a plan to ambush a caravan and steal their supplies. When Liu gave the signal, him and his men were to descend from a nearby hill and slaughter the entire caravan. This was when Liu got his very first taste of real bloodshed. This was nothing like abusing his subjects or hiring thugs to beat someone up. This was where his lust for blood had begun. One of his men recounted that he had never seen anyone so ruthless and bloodthirsty as Liu Pengli. While Liu and his men enjoyed the spoils of their terror, they made plans to raid a nearby village. Adrenaline pumping and high off of victory, Liu and his men marched into the village, ruthlessly slaughtering anyone in their path. Men, women, the elderly, it didn't matter. Nothing would stop him from satisfying his thirst for blood. As Liu and his men went village to village, the bodies would quickly start stacking up behind them. Word around the kingdom started to spread of a gang of bandits who were murdering, raping, and pillaging innocent villages. The common man quickly became terrified of the horrors of these stories, not knowing that it was really their own prince, the very man who was meant to protect and serve his people, was the very reason why they began barricading themselves in their houses at night, in a feeble attempt to avoid being murdered. By this time, Liu and his men had already been responsible for the murders of over 100 people, although the exact number is unknown. Even after Liu learned that there was evidence that he was leading these raids, he wasn't too bothered by it. His uncle was the emperor, and he's the prince after all. However, a letter finally reached the emperor that accused Liu Pengli of mass murder. After over 20 years of ruling his kingdom, Liu's reign of terror was about to come to an end when Emperor Wen decided to take action and launch an investigation into his nephew for mass murder. After finding sufficient evidence, Liu was summoned to Emperor Wen's castle for trial. When he was caught, he made it no secret to the public that he was guilty. When asked why he did it, Liu plainly answered, quote, "Because I like it," unquote. When it came to his fate, he was spared the death penalty, as the emperor could not bear to kill his own blood. He was instead exiled, stripped of his possessions, and his title of prince. He was forced to restart life and live as a peasant in Zhaoyang. After being exiled, it's unknown if he continued his rampage or not.